some of these things, some of these quotes. Donald Trump was talking about John Heilemann.
Yeah.
And I think Peggy Noonan's column in the Wall Street Journal hits it on exactly where Donald Trump and Kamala Harris find themselves in this very topsy-turvy political season. First of all, Peggy writes, I continue to believe the woman isn't creating a movement, but a movement is creating her, and they are showing up. And man, are they showing up. Mr. Trump spent most of the week having what a GOP strategist told Politico is a public nervous breakdown. It's Donald Trump. And then finally, another telling quote from Peggy. And this is fascinating. For the first time this week, I thought people were wondering about the impact of Mr. Trump's age. He is 78. He hasn't been able to focus, make his case. Is he, in another irony of 2024, turning into Joe Biden? And the split screens have not been good for him at all this week, John. And you look at the polls and you can read these polls that are coming in, and it is only August, but there certainly is momentum. But there's also, again, something that we haven't seen from Donald Trump since 2016, and that is just the complete failings of his political instincts to rise to a moment.
Well, I think you're seeing fear, Joe, apart from everything else. And I just want to say, kind of playing off that last bit of the sound there where he said, he's letting the Democratic convention go through. I wanted to announce right here on the show that I'm going to allow Morning Joe to continue for the rest of the morning in the same spirit as Donald Trump. I have about as much control over that as Donald Trump does over the Democratic convention. So I think, people predicted that this would happen. The thing related to Trump becoming now the old man of the race, and that the focus there was a lot of discussion about this when Joe Biden was still in the race. People would say, correctly, Donald Trump is also an old man. Donald Trump is also slipping, losing miles an hour off his fastball, has difficulty processing as a cognitive matter, and they would say there's a double standard here. And you would say, yeah, there's a double standard here. And I'll tell you what the double standard was always. The press is terrible at focusing on two things at the same time. And for a long time, the fact that Joe Biden's affect, that he seemed less energetic than Trump, gave Trump, not saying it's a good thing or justifying it, it was just what happened, was that people focused on Biden.
Right.
And Trump's failings in this area got ignored, even though we, on many occasions on this show, we would point to various Trump mental failures.
Right.
Now, though, without Joe Biden in the race, the press is focused on that question. And it's much more glaring to people that how many cognitive failures Donald Trump has, especially when he stands in an unscripted way in front of the press. And it's part of it's cognitive, part of it's psychological, part of it's emotional. The tics, going back to the same grievances over and over again, the inability to process really basic facts, the massive errors that he makes all the time, the incoherence, all those things are standing in much starker relief now, which gets to your point that I think is the key point and the point that Peggy's making. It is just the case that the split screen now is a split screen that is much more punishing to Donald Trump than the split screen when it was Joe Biden on the other side of that screen. And again, you can talk about how you like the world, how you want the world to be. Yeah. I'll tell you about how the world is.
It's just
that's the reality.
It's so funny you said that last weekend. Caddy, last weekend, my kids and I were watching the Olympics, and there was a local news break, and they showed it was one of these, poll came out and it showed the split screen and the two candidates on both sides. And it was the first time that I had seen Kamala Harris, 59-year-old Kamala Harris, I think she's 59, next to 78-year-old Donald Trump. And it was quite jarring. Politics is all about contrast. That's what I learned in the first campaign school I went to 30 years ago. They said, the campaign is about contrast. The visual contrast is striking. You look at the press conference yesterday and the exaggerations and the outright lies that were told in Donald Trump's press conferences, also talking about us being on the verge of a depression when the United States is more powerful economically relative to the rest of the world than it's been in 20, 30, 40 years. And I could go down that list again, but there's no need. People know that that's the truth. But you have Kamala Harris saying, we love our country. We believe in our country on one side. And then you have Donald Trump on the other side saying our country's lousy. That is, and again, going back to Peggy Noonan and her life's work, regardless of ideology, Americans want optimism. They want hope. They want someone looking to the future. And boy, that is another stark contrast that you see in yesterday and in the previous few weeks.
Yeah, there's a lot more kind of Sonny Reagan about the Democratic ticket at the moment than there is about the Republican ticket. And you see that in all the rallies. I mean, you see it in the fact that Donald Trump is not really holding rallies. He's holed up in Mar-a-Lago. He's doing one rally today in Montana, a state where he's 15 points ahead. So that's kind of head-scratching. But it was a case of grievance. And that's what we're seeing from the campaign. And case in point about Donald Trump's mental acuity. During yesterday's news conference, he told a sort of weird story about nearly dying during a helicopter ride. But as the New York Times points out, there was only one problem with the story, or maybe two, or maybe three problems. Here's the ex-president yesterday at Mar-a-Lago when asked about former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown, who briefly dated Vice President Kamala Harris nearly 3 decades ago. Take a listen.
Well, I know Willie Brown very well. In fact, I went down in a helicopter with him. We thought maybe this is the end. We were in a helicopter going to a certain location together, and there was an emergency landing. This was not a pleasant landing, and Willie was he was a little concerned. So I know him pretty well. I mean, I haven't seen him in years. But he told me terrible things about her. But this is what you're telling me anyway, I guess. But he had a big part in what happened with Kamala. But I don't know, maybe he's changed his tune, but he was not a fan of hers very much at that point.
OK, so it's an odd story, but what's the real issue with that story? Well, it appears it never actually happened. First, Trump was never on a helicopter with Willie Brown. He's apparently confusing him with former California Governor Jerry Brown. Take a look. The two don't really look terribly similar. Secondly, there was never any emergency landing, as Trump claimed, and the helicopter's passengers were never in any danger. Mayor Brown, who, as the Times notes, loves regaling anybody who will listen with stories, said, quote, "You know me well enough to know that if I almost went down in a helicopter with anybody, you would have heard about it." And according to Gavin Newsom, who was also on that ride, there was never any discussion at all about one Kamala Harris. For his part, Willie Brown isn't saying terrible things about Harris at all. In fact, he remains an avid supporter of hers. You understand why they use the word weird. The group took a helicopter to survey wildfire damage in 2018, an event where Trump would confuse the name of the town that was destroyed and also claim the solution to California's wildfire crisis was to, quote, rake the forest floors. So do you remember that, raking the forest floors,
yes.
Joe? That was one of those particular. Anyway, the story didn't make sense. It didn't really happen. The people were different from the people he said it was. Otherwise, I guess all good.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, you know, Rev, it reminds me when we got into that sort of dust up on the International Space Station. Stayed up there longer than we expected, and it was Tension City. You know, yesterday the Wall Street Journal editorial page wrote an op-ed talking about how Donald Trump now seems primed to lose yet another race that he should win. And you look at this press conference, you look at the fact that his people just don't want him to go out and give speeches. I'm sure they didn't want him to go out and give the press conference yesterday, but Donald Trump probably still driven by that belief, I alone can do it. But again, it just there's nothing comforting about that. And again, I go back to Peggy Noonan asking the question, or saying for the first time this week, I thought people were wondering about the impact of Mr. Trump's age. He is 78. He hasn't been able to focus to make his case. Is he, in another irony of 2024, turning into Joe Biden? Well, he's certainly, nothing that's happened the past week would suggest otherwise, would it?
Nothing would suggest otherwise, but I would say to anyone that Joe Biden never just started remembering emergency landings of helicopters with people that didn't exist. I mean, even the story within itself. Can you imagine in the middle of an emergency landing, you start talking about somebody you dated years ago in bad terms? I mean, the whole story doesn't make sense, aside from the fact that he had the people mixed up. And then he said that his rally, January 6th, drew as many people as Martin Luther King's March on Washington. I assume he's talking about 1963 because that's the only March on Washington Martin Luther King had. They said Martin Luther King had 1 million and I had 25,000. That's what they said. Well, first of all, the Million Man March wasn't until 95, 27 years after King was dead. King didn't call that march. And the fact that he would compare the Million Man March or the King March of 250,000 to who he had January 6th and not remember January 6th was an attempt to overthrow an election shows that I think we might have chose the wrong old man to walk off the stage.